Welcome back to Meet Me for Murder. I'm your host, Rachel Colo, and if you're here listening, thank you so much. It truly means a lot to me, especially while this podcast is so new. Today, we're heading to New Orleans, and I have to say, I completely fell in love with the city when I visited for the first time a few months ago. It's beautiful and historic, and also chaotic, mysterious, soulful, and honestly, a little haunted. And because I'm me, I did a ghost tour while I was there and absolutely loved it. Would recommend 10 out of 10. And that's where I first heard about this case. The second I got home, I knew it's a story that I needed to share. This isn't just a murder case. It's a story about trauma, addiction, obsession, mental health, and a relationship that spiraled completely out of control. At one point, Zach Bowen and Addie Hall were almost romanticized by the media. They were seen as this passionate, rebellious couple surviving together in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. But by the end, one would be dead, the other would die by suicide, and their names would be attached to one of the most disturbing crime scenes New Orleans had seen in years. It was October 17th, 2006, when police were called to a parking garage in the French Quarter after reports that a man had jumped from the roof. I will just, as a quick side note, say the French Quarter is absolutely incredible. The music, the food, the vibes, the architecture. If you have not been, I seriously recommend going. But it was October 17th, 2006, when police were called to a parking garage in the French Quarter after reports that a man had jumped from the roof. When officers arrived, they thought that they were dealing with a tragic suicide. But when they searched the body's pockets, inside, they found military dog tags with the name Zachary Bowen. They also found a folded note, and written on the outside were instructions specifically for police. When detectives opened it, it changed everything. The note said his death was not an accident. It said he had taken his own life to pay for the life he had taken. Then it gave an address, 826 North Rampart Street. According to the note, inside that apartment, police would find the dismembered body of his girlfriend. No. Can you imagine being the detective reading that note? Because one second, you're responding to what you think is one tragedy, and the next you realize the real nightmare hasn't even started yet. Police rushed to the apartment on North Rampart Street. The moment they stepped inside, they knew something was wrong. There were moving boxes stacked around the apartment, beer cans everywhere. The place felt chaotic, abandoned, and completely unstable. And then there were the walls. Spray painted in black were messages like, "I loved her," and "Please help me stop the pain." Another message told someone to call his wife, which this is so sad to me. I think from like a mental health perspective, just the messages of "I loved her, please help me stop the pain." This sounds like someone who was really in a dark place, and just reading these just makes me feel for these people. It was obvious that this wasn't random. Whatever happened here was personal, emotional, and violent. Kind of what I was mentioning before. But before we get to what police found inside, we need to talk about who Zach Bowen was before he became his story. Because no one is born as the headline they eventually become. Years earlier, Zach was a teenager trying to figure out his life. When he was around 17, he took a cross-country road trip with his dad. They ended up in New Orleans and decided to stay for a while. Now, I will say, when I was his age, I also did a European trip with my dad, and we had the best time. I think as a young person, these are life-building experiences, and it's amazing that you get to share them with your family. And honestly, I get it. New Orleans has this magnetic pull. It attracts people who are looking for freedom, reinvention, or just somewhere to feel alive. I certainly felt this when I went and visited. It felt like home. It felt like a place that had been calling to me for years. I left New Orleans saying I could move here, like genuinely. So again, if you haven't gone, you have to go. Like, I will rave about New Orleans and give you any recommendations. People who knew him described him as a funny, charming, goofy, social, and just easy to like guy. He was also hard to miss because he was extremely tall, around 6'10". When I read that, 6'10", I don't think I've ever met someone that height, but I would love to. And if there's anyone 6'10", please hit me up. I would love that. So he enrolled in school in New Orleans, but eventually dropped out. Soon after turning 18, he started working in bars on Bourbon Street. And if you've ever been to Bourbon Street, it is sensory overload in the most New Orleans way. Music pouring out of every doorway, neon lights, crowds, drinks, street performers, chaos everywhere. For someone like Zach, it probably felt like exactly where he belonged. Also, Bourbon Street is known to have like open carry alcohol. I'm not sure how you would say that, but basically you can walk from bar to bar with different drinks. Like you can drink out in public, which I had never seen before and makes for a really fun time. While working in the bar scene, Zach met a woman named Lena Shupak. Lena was from Texas and was almost 10 years older than Zach. She had come to New Orleans on vacation with friends, and she and Zach connected quickly. What started as a vacation flirtation turned serious fast. After Lena went back to Texas, they stayed in touch, and eventually Zach convinced her to come back to New Orleans. How romantic is that? You go on vacation, you find someone, you're vibing, they want to make it more serious, and they invite you to move out to their city. That's like the dream, right? How fun. But you really hope things work out if you're going to move across state lines for someone, that's for sure. So she did. They moved in together, and at first it had that intense, exciting, new relationship energy. But then Lana found out Zach was only 18. Ugh, you guys, that's so bad to think someone is older than they are and find out that they've lied about their age. Remember, she was almost a decade older than him, and so to find out he's 18, I feel so bad. She moved across state lines for him. Like, that's terrible. No thanks. Lana had thought he was older. He looked older, he worked in bars, and he carried himself like he was older. But once she learned the truth, she was shocked and uncomfortable. Rightfully so, Lana. That's not normal. So she started pulling away, and she was distancing herself because obviously this man had lied to her about her age, and she wasn't happy about that. Then the unthinkable happened, and she found out she was pregnant. Go figure. Like, the poor girl, the situation for her, I'm just like, that's not fun. She finds out this guy's 18, then finds out she's having his baby after they've basically already broken up. Not chill. Not chill. So after she found out she was pregnant, at first, Lana didn't tell Zach. She believed he was too young and immature to be a father. But after giving birth to their son in July 1997, she eventually had a friend contact him. When Zach met his baby for the first time, people close to them said something changed in him. The carefree bartender suddenly wanted to step up. He wanted to be a father. He wanted to provide. And I think that matters. Because later in the story, Zach becomes associated with horror. But at this point, he was also a young dad just trying to do better. And honestly, props to him for being 18 and wanting to step up to be a dad and a provider for his little family. I'm honestly impressed. There's a lot of 18-year-olds that would not dare take on that responsibility. People are rarely just one thing, and this case is full of contradiction. In 1998, Zach proposed to Lana. She said yes, they got married, and the next year they had a second child. Again, like, I really admire Zach for stepping up and fulfilling his duty as a father and also wanting to be a husband to his family. I'm honestly really impressed. So by 19, Zach was a husband, a father of two, and still basically trying to become an adult himself. Around this time, Zach had a small run-in with the law after he was found carrying a makeshift bong made from a soda can. I don't know anything about that. I don't know how that's possible, but this just seems like a real bummer as this man's trying to be a good dad and he gets caught making a makeshift bong. So he said it wasn't his, and eventually someone else came forward and said it belonged to them. The charges were dropped. But that experience rattled him. He wanted direction. He wanted to be someone respectable. He wanted to feel like he was doing something with his life, I think especially as a young father and husband. So he turned to his older brother, who was in the military. His brother encouraged him to enlist. The Army could give him structure, income, housing, and a path forward. There was just one problem. Zach needed his GED, so he got it. Then in May 2000, he enlisted in the United States Army. At the time, it probably looked like everything was finally falling into place. He had a wife, 2 kids, and a fresh start and a future. But military life would change him in ways no one around him fully understood. And I think it's hard if you haven't been in the military or you don't know someone who has been. It's hard to understand what it can do to someone psychologically and physically. After basic training, Zach was stationed in Germany. Lana and the kids planned to join him after he got settled. Then Zach was deployed in Kosovo. There, he repeatedly helped people recover bodies from mass graves. Honestly, so sad. He was also said to have befriended a young girl and given her candy, only to later learn she'd been killed for speaking to an American soldier. I imagine that really rattled Zach. Him trying to be a nice guy and give a little girl candy, like probably thinking about his own kids and how much she would enjoy that. To then have her punished for that, it's terrible. Friends and family later believe moments like that deeply affected him, and I would agree. He also dealt with serious physical pain because of his height and size. Remember, he is 6'10". He struggled to get properly fitted boots and developed foot problems that later required surgery. Eventually, Lana and the children moved to Germany and the family was reunited. Big, happy family, right? And then, after September 11th, Zach was deployed again, but this time to Iraq. There, he reportedly witnessed more violence, lost close friends, and experienced more trauma. By the time he returned home, those closest to him said he was not the same person. And how could he be after the atrocities that he had witnessed? I don't blame him. He reportedly became withdrawn, angry, distant, and many believe he was suffering from untreated PTSD. Over time, Zach began resenting the army. He reportedly sabotaged his own military career and was eventually discharged. But he did not receive an honorable discharge. He received a general discharge, which meant he lost access to many veteran benefits and support systems he may have badly needed, which I think is so unfair. He did his time and he served his country, and then he's got the dishonorable discharge. When Lana found out, she was furious. Obviously, the wife's like, you just left the kids and I, and we moved to Germany afterwards to be with you, and now we don't have all these benefits that we were going to get, but that's probably the last thing he needed. She felt that he had thrown away the opportunity they had built their lives around. I get it, girl, but come on, let's have some compassion. Their marriage, already strained, finally collapsed. Lana returned to New Orleans, and Zach eventually followed with the children after finishing their school term overseas. But by then, the family was basically over. Lana had started seeing someone else. Zach moved into a hotel and tried to figure out what came next. According to his family, he rarely talked openly about what he had experienced overseas. He bottled it up, which I understand. That's a coping mechanism, right? And that is something we see over and over again in these stories. It's so devastating. Silence. People assume time will heal trauma when sometimes time only gives it more room to grow. By 2005, Zach was back in New Orleans working again as a bartender in the French Quarter, which he so loved doing before. He went back to what he knew, right? His roots. And at first, people said he seemed like himself again. He was charming, funny, good with customers, and popular with regulars. If you met him casually, you might never have known what he was carrying. He worked the graveyard shift at a bar, entertaining tourists and regulars through the night. And that is where he met Addie Hall. Addie was 29 and originally from Durham, North Carolina. She had first visited New Orleans for Mardi Gras in 2002 and completely fell in love with the city, which, by the way, I've never been to Mardi Gras, but I absolutely want to go. I've heard it's the best time. And after visiting New Orleans and loving it so much, I have to go. So if anyone wants to go, hit me up. Let's plan it. Eventually, Addie moved there. Addie was artistic, free-spirited, and unconventional. She painted, danced, wrote poetry, traveled, and fully embraced life in the French Quarter. She even called herself a quartertician, meaning someone who belonged to the French Quarter. I love that they give themselves names. It's the best. She worked the morning shift at the same bar where Zach worked overnights, so their schedules overlapped. At first, Addie reportedly didn't like Zach. She thought he was strange because he did magic tricks for the customers. Honestly, if a man started doing card tricks around me at work, I would need a minute. I would need a minute too, Addie. But Zach liked her immediately. He started staying after his shift just to talk to her. They drank together, laughed together, and slowly opened up to each other. Both had complicated pasts. Both carried pain. Both seemed drawn to intensity. Eventually, Addie's opinion changed. Annoyance turned into attraction turned into attachment, and soon they were together. Friends described them as inseparable almost immediately. But there was one major problem. Zach had not been fully honest. And this is a pattern we're starting to see, right? With Lana, he did not reveal that he was like 18. And so let's see what he does to Addie. Let's see what he lied about now. Yeah, so he was still legally married and had 2 children. Let's not forget that. When Addie found out, she was shocked and angry. And honestly, can we blame her? No. Those are not tiny details to leave out. If I started dating a man and he had a whole family that he hadn't told me about, it'd be over. Like, game over. Absolutely not, right? So she's pretty founded in her reaction. But after arguments, time, and whatever, chemistry existed between them, she decided to stay. And within a week, something catastrophic was heading straight for New Orleans. Can you guess? Hurricane Katrina. By late August 2005, Zach and Addie were still in that early, intense phase of their relationship. They were working, drinking, spending all their time together, and building a connection that moved way too fast. But we've all been there, right? You meet someone, you fall head over heels, you spend all your time together. It seems like the right move at the moment. Then Katrina started forming. At first, experts thought the storm would hit as a Category 3. Still serious, but not unimaginable for a city used to hurricanes. Then Katrina strengthened. Officials began issuing evacuation orders. People who could leave were told to go. During this time, Lana reportedly contacted Zach in a panic. She needed help evacuating with the children, but according to reports, Zach chose not to leave with Lana and the kids. Ugh, Zach, come on. What happened to being that good father and husband? Well, the husband thing left a while ago, we know, but come on, if there's a hurricane coming, get the kids out of there. No excuses. Instead, he stayed in the French Quarter with Addie. Now, the French Quarter does sit on slightly higher ground than many other parts of New Orleans. Also, I've been saying New Orleans, but I'm pretty sure it's New Orleans. And so now that I'm thinking about it, I'm going to get roasted. New Orleans. It's fun to say. I still don't think I'm saying it right. Oh, no. But I'm going to keep saying New Orleans because I just kind of like that. So come for me in the comments if you want, but don't because I like the way I say it. Some locals believed it was safer during flooding to stay in the French Quarter since it's higher up. But from Lana's perspective, the father of her children had chosen his new girlfriend over helping his family during an emergency. And honestly, girl, I kind of see it that way too. And whether or not Zach saw it that way, that is how it felt to her. On August 29th, 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit Louisiana with devastating force. The levee system failed, neighborhoods flooded, families were separated, thousands were trapped, homes were destroyed. More than 1,800 people lost their lives. And I remember seeing this on the news, and I'm from California, so we get earthquakes, and I hadn't really seen the effects of a hurricane before this, and I remember the news footage, and it truly was devastating. Lana and the children eventually made it to a shelter and later relocated to Texas. She tried calling Zach repeatedly, but communication in the city was almost impossible. At one point, she feared he had died because she's reaching out, and doesn't hear anything. But Zach was alive. The French Quarter had damage, but it avoided the catastrophic flooding seen in other neighborhoods. Zach and Addie stayed in Addie's apartment, surrounded by darkness, destruction, and a city in crisis. And strangely, this became the emotional high point of their relationship. In the middle of one of America's worst disasters, they created their own little worlds. They had no jobs, no bills, no real schedule, no rules. And these two thrived. People in the neighborhood formed makeshift communities. They cleared debris, shared food, drank together, and tried to survive. And in that surreal environment, Zach and Addie seemed to thrive. They drank heavily, used drugs, spent nights together by candlelight, and leaned into the lawlessness of the moment. It sounds unbelievable, but in the aftermath of disasters, some people experience this strange sense of freedom. Normal life disappears overnight. For people already drawn to chaos, that can feel exciting, at least at first. Zach and Addie even caught the attention of journalists covering post-Katrina New Orleans. They were photographed and written about almost like this rebellious love story, a beautiful, reckless couple surviving while the world burned around them. But public image and private truth are rarely the same thing. That's why the saying, "no one knows what happens behind closed doors," is so true. Because underneath that romanticized version, there were warning signs everywhere. For Zach, seeing military forces and emergency personnel in the city reportedly triggered memories from overseas. The uniforms, weapons, and organized response brought back the trauma he tried to bury. PTSD does not disappear because life becomes exciting for a while. It waits, and eventually it resurfaces. As weeks passed, New Orleans slowly began rebuilding. Businesses reopened, jobs returned, responsibilities came back. And the fantasy started to crack. Zach and Addie had built their relationship in the suspended reality where nothing normal was expected of them. And once real life came back, so did everything that they had been avoiding. money, work, parenting, emotional baggage, sobriety, consequences. Meanwhile, Lana and the children eventually came back to New Orleans. It's their home. That's when she learned Zach had survived and had been living openly in the city. I literally cannot imagine there is a natural disaster and you don't hear from your husband, even though they're estranged and not together, to learn that he's totally fine and had not made an effort to contact you. So Lana's furious. She believed that he had made no real effort to contact his children after the storm. Eventually, Zach and Lana came to an arrangement. He would pay child support and see the children every other weekend. And this is where tension with Addie got worse. Friends say Addie resented Lana's continued presence in Zach's life. She also reportedly did not like the children being around. When the kids came over, Addie would allegedly refuse to engage with them. Sometimes she left the apartment completely. Other times, she isolated herself or came back intoxicated. Eventually, according to accounts, she told Zach the children were no longer welcome in the apartment. If he wanted to see them, he had to do it somewhere else. On one side, his chaotic relationship with Addie, is he going to choose that? Or on the other hand, it's his responsibilities as a father. Does he want to continue and pursue that instead? And instead of stabilizing, everything gets worse after this. Zach and Addie's substance use escalated. If you add alcohol, unresolved trauma, jealousy, instability, and emotional volatility, and you have a dangerous mix. By early 2006, the relationship was deeply toxic. Friends say that they were constantly breaking up and getting back together, sometimes within days, sometimes within hours. Their fights became louder, more dramatic, and increasingly physical. Zach reportedly became intensely jealous, especially when Addie worked behind the bar and interacted with her customers. That's literally her job, so this is not great. He would show up, watch her, accuse her of flirting, and cause scenes. Addie was also volatile. She reportedly had a history of aggressive behavior when intoxicated and was known to carry an unloaded gun in her purse. You guys, this is just stressing me out. At one point, after an argument with a stranger, she allegedly pointed the gun at him and was arrested on charges including aggravated assault. And still, the cycle continued. Fight, break up, reunite, repeat. Anyone who has witnessed a relationship like this knows how exhausting it is to watch. Everyone on the outside can see the destruction coming, but the two people inside it keep convincing themselves it's love. It's hard to watch. At one point, after a major argument, Zach told friends he was done. Done with Addie. Done with New Orleans. Done with the chaos. He left to stay with family and even left Addie a goodbye note. But it didn't last. Soon he came back. The pull between them was stronger than common sense, stronger than the warning signs, and stronger than the damage already done. Then things got even more explosive. Zach reportedly began seeing other people, including a man. Accounts state that he identified as bisexual, something Addie may not have been fully aware of before, because when she discovers it, witnesses say that she was furious. She allegedly stole his phone, called people in his contacts to spread lies, and deleted his entire contact list. These two, I can't. By this point, any trace of the romantic Katrina love story was gone. What remained was obsession, humiliation, rage, and mutual destruction. And then in one final twist, Addie suggests that they move into a new apartment together. She was having issues with her landlord and wanted a fresh start. Zach agrees. They found an apartment on North Rampart Street above a spiritual voodoo shop in the French Quarter. They toured it together and loved it. Zach reportedly gave $1,500 towards securing the apartment, and then they got the key. To him, maybe it looked like a new beginning, but just days later, Addie returned alone and asked the landlord to put the lease only in her name. After Zach found out, everything collapsed. In the early morning hours of October 5th, 2006, Zach came home from work to the new apartment on North Rampart Street. According to later accounts, Addie told him she had secured the lease in only her name and planned to force him out. If true, that meant the money he gave her, the plans they made, and the fresh start he thought they were getting had all been taken from him. They began arguing. There were no witnesses, so much of what we know comes from Zach's own writings after the fact. According to those entries, Addie screamed at him, insulted him, threw his belongings, and hurled bad words at him. Whether every detail was true or whether Zach wrote it to justify what he did, we cannot know for certain. What we do know is that the argument turned deadly. At some point, Zach put his hands around Addie's neck and strangled her to death. And just like that, everything changed forever. One moment, they were in another toxic fight. The next, Addie was dead. After killing her, Zach stayed in the apartment. Ugh. Then, in one of the most disturbing parts of this case, he began writing about what happened in Addie's journal. He described the argument and claimed he had very calmly strangled her. I don't know how you could very calmly strangle someone, so that's neither here nor there. That word is chilling. Some people read those entries as detached or disassociated. Others see coldness. It may have been both. Then the case became even darker. For days, Zach remained in the apartment with Addie's body. I can't imagine. It must have smelled terrible. And also, that's just so dark and eerie. Imagine being in a house with someone that's not alive. That's not okay. He went to work, he socialized, he told coworkers Addie had left him and gone back to North Carolina. People noticed he looked awful, exhausted, disheveled, not like himself. But Addie had a reputation for being spontaneous and dramatic, so some people believed she really had left. Outwardly, Zach was still functioning. Privately, he was completely unraveling. According to his writings, he spent the next 9 days on a destructive bender. It seems that he had decided that once the money ran out, his life would too. Meanwhile, Addie was dead inside the apartment. At some point, Zach turned the air conditioning as low as possible, apparently to slow decomposition. Which makes sense, because otherwise neighbors are going to be complaining, right, about the smell. He also dismembered Addie's body. When police later entered the apartment, they found remains placed throughout the unit, including in the kitchen. Investigators described it as one of the most disturbing scenes they had ever encountered. The details became the center of media coverage, and they were horrifying. But Zach himself was also clearly spiraling. He reportedly burned his arms with cigarettes, spray painted messages on the walls, and continued writing about guilt, pain, and despair. I loved her. Please help me stop the pain. Those words do not excuse anything. What he did was horrific, but they do show someone in total psychological collapse. Then came October 17th. 12 days after Addie's death, Zach went to a rooftop bar in the French Quarter. He ordered drinks. He paced around. A bartender noticed he was acting strangely and thought maybe he was going to leave without paying his tab. Then suddenly, Zach jumped from the rooftop. He died at the scene. When police searched his pockets, they found the note directing them to the apartment. And that is how investigators found Addie. Once the news broke, the media swarmed. The details were shocking, gruesome, and impossible to ignore. Zach was given sensational nicknames like the Katrina Cannibal or the Butcher of the Quarter. Rumor spread that he had eaten Addie's remains. That claim became part of the story so quickly that many people still believe it today. But investigators and the medical examiner reportedly found no evidence of cannibalism. And that matters because true crime stories often get distorted by spectacle. The most outrageous version spreads the fastest, even when it isn't supported by facts. And honestly, this case was already horrific enough without adding rumors. For Addie's family, the aftermath was devastating. Reports said it took time before relatives were able to claim her remains. Zach's family claimed him sooner and arranged a quiet cremation. His ashes were reportedly later given to Lana and his children. Under the headlines, the ghost tours, the nicknames, and the rumors, there were 2 children who lost their father in one of the most public and horrifying ways imaginable. They also lost any chance of the world knowing him outside of what he did. Years later, the apartment on North Rampart Street became a stop on the New Orleans ghost tours. People leave cigarettes, alcohol, drawings, and money. Some claim they feel spirits there. Some say they have seen ghosts. And because it's New Orleans, the city absorbed the story into its haunted mythology. But personally, I think reducing this case to ghost tours or curses misses the real tragedy. The story was not a possession story because they lived above a voodoo shop. It was not a glamorous doom love story. It was not just a spooky urban legend. This was a story about unrelated trauma, addiction, instability, and 2 people who became each other's worst environment. Zach returned from war carrying wounds he never properly dealt with. Addie carried her own history of chaos, aggression, and pain. Instead of healing, they collided. Hurricane Katrina briefly made that collision look like romance, but once normal life returned, the damage was still there, waiting. And that is what makes this case so haunting. Not the apartment, not the ghost stories, not the headlines, What haunts this case is how preventable parts of it may have been if help, treatment, accountability, and stability had entered the picture sooner. By the time police found that note in Zach Bowen's pocket, everyone involved had already lost. If you or someone you know is struggling with thoughts of suicide, please reach out for support. You can contact the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by calling or texting 988 anytime, 24 hours a day. You do not have to go through it alone. Thank you for listening to Meet Me for Murder. If this episode moved you, share it with someone who loves true crime, and leave a review if you want to support the show while it's still growing. I appreciate every single one of you for being here. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.